concerned about obesity and obesity-related things, please feel free to speak up about that. So, as far as introductions go, my name is Kathleen Colleran. I'm an endocrinologist through the University of New Mexico, as well as Envision, New Mexico. Clancy?
I'm Clancy Tarbuck. I'm a program coordinator for telehealth here at Envision, New Mexico.
I'm Dan Rifkin. I'm a pediatric psychiatrist here at Envision, New Mexico, and other Department of Pediatrics programs, including school-based health centers.
And this is Kevin Werling, Systems Analyst for Envision, New Mexico, and IT support. And one quick thing to note, if you need to mute your line, it's there's a command for that, *#, and *# to unmute as well.
Okay, let's go to the phones. If you're on the phones, can you please introduce yourself, tell us where you're at and what you do?
This is Cassandra Vanderpool. I'm in Albuquerque. I work for New Mexico State University Cooperative Extension Service. I'm a registered dietitian.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
This is Janae Avila. I'm calling in from Molina Healthcare here in Albuquerque, and I'm a quality improvement specialist.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is Erica Smith. I am a registered dietitian here at the Hopi Healthcare Center.
Okay.
And that's in Palaca, Arizona.
There's a Palaca, Arizona.
Yep, Palaca. We're northern Arizona. We are 2 hours east of Flagstaff, northeast Flag.
This is Eileen Miller, and I'm from Red Lake Reservation Indian Health Service, and I'm a diabetes educator, and we are experiencing an increase of our young people that are being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes.
And Red Lake is in Minnesota, is that correct?
Yes, it is, northern Minnesota.
Okay.
Welcome, Red Lake, Minnesota.
I'll be up in
Thank you.
Minneapolis in a week. So make the snow go away.
Ooh, they just got about 12 inches the other day.
And did
Getting
Red
some more
Lake
today,
get
they
snow?
said.
God.
We missed the snow. It went south. So our snow just melted last week.
Wow.
Hello?
A late spring.
Yes, hello.
Hi, my name is Mavis Williams. I'm calling from Eastern New Mexico University in Roswell.
Hello.
I'm just here to, my boss, Gina Bodra, was not able to attend this webinar because she had a previous meeting, so we thought it would be very interesting for us to sit in and listen to see what we can learn.
That's great, because we are very interested in working with Roswell through the Department of Health initiative. So we look forward to talking to you more.
All righty.
Hi, this is Cindy Johnson. I'm with Sierra Vista Hospital in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. I do infection control.
Hello. Other phone people?
Yes, this is Diana and Delinda. We're from CARC Inc. in Carlsbad, New Mexico. We're an early intervention service.
Oh, great. Thank you. Anyone else who hasn't introduced themselves? We will do this again during one of the break sessions. So we do want you to get credit for participating, and we also want to get credit for your participation. So anybody else?
Hi, this is David Selvage with Department of Health in Santa Fe. I'm the Pertussis epidemiologist.
Thank you, David. You're a key player here today, so I'm glad you announced yourself.
Well, thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity.
No, and I think we'll be able to do some other similar things if you just have a little bit of patience with me. But so right now what we're going to do is our didactic, which is going to be done by Kevin, our IT system analyst specialist extraordinaire. And his talk is entitled COMM-TC, which if you guys don't know, because I can never remember, Childhood Overweight Obesity Medical Management Teleconference. And he will be talking about using technology to intervene in childhood obesity. And this is, of course, noteworthy because kids use technology, social media, etc. to communicate, to interact, to play, to have fun. And I will tell you about my most recent experience with this before he gets started. My children and I went to play mini golf on Saturday night. And there were all these prom couples there.
Some real swingers.
Yes. Oh, God. I did not even cue him on that. So, yeah, they teed off. However, one example was there was a couple sitting at a picnic table across from each other, and they were both on their devices, texting and doing whatever, but never during the entire hour that we were there did they look at each other or have a word passed across one another. I'm sure they were texting each other. But anyway, social media, it's here to stay. We can't get rid of it, so we got to use it. And thank you, Kevin.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity to research this and present. That's a funny example. It's something that my wife and I do. We're in the same room with the kids, and we want to communicate to each other something that maybe the kids shouldn't hear, or something about Santa Claus, maybe. So we text each other. But kind of the point here is the technology itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. So it's the way that we're using it. So just a couple of housekeeping deals here. You're already connected, but if you're not, you can see the screen. If you need to mute, *# will do that for you. I have nothing to disclose. We are going to be talking about products and services here, and I don't work for any of these companies, and I have nothing to disclose. We did want to mention as well, if you do have patients that you would like to consult with us on, Molina Healthcare has partnered with us to pay you $150 each time that you consult with us on a Molina patient. So please contact us. Our coordinator, Clancy Tarbox, would be happy to help you out with the forms. And for more information, there's the information right there.
And that's for primary care providers.
That is for primary care providers. Thanks, Clancy.
As well as, but nurses, dietitians?
Who are presenting for a primary care
Right,
provider.
right.
Okay.
Thank you, Clancy.
So here's our goals for today. Basically, we're going to be looking at devices, software, and websites that encourage healthy food choices and physical activity. So, of course, as we were kind of talking about a little bit ago, technology is really part of the problem, but it's really more the way that we're using it. So, certainly you can sit down in front of a video game system and play it for hours on end, but there's ways you can use that video game system that is active and that are active, and you're not just sitting there kind of mindlessly doing nothing. Just one thing I wanted to mention here, there's a Pew Internet study that was this year that showed that 78% of American teens have cell phones, and 47% of them have smartphones with computing capability. Of course, they have to have a data plan, but many of them do. So that brings up just a few stats from Northwestern University that support the use of these applications and devices. So when you combine weight loss regimen with a mobile app that tracks eating and activity, both of those two things, that's critical, the average weight loss in adolescents is 15 pounds. And if you don't even have a weight loss regimen, if you use one of these apps, in all likelihood, you're going to lose 8 pounds. And all these apps, of course, included goal setting, calorie and activity tracking, and social support in some way, shape, or form. So those are all important aspects of it. One thing I read recently while researching this was about the Pediatric Comprehensive Weight Management Center at University of Michigan. They started up a program where they ran a survey with adolescents and used that survey to target text messages to these obese children. So they first started out by sending out text messages like, well, so maybe on the survey the student said, well, for breakfast I have ice cream so I can have some calcium in my life. Sounds like a really good idea, right? No. So they started out with these text messages that said, instead of ice cream, try yogurt this morning, or frozen yogurt this morning. So those didn't go over so well, so they targeted it and kind of truncated it even more to say, try yogurt this morning. So they worked it a little bit and they got some results. They were able to give a little bit more individualized obesity counseling to these students based on the surveys. And it's still in progress, so it sounds like the preliminary results are favorable. So we'll have to see what happens with this, but this is the kind of research that's going on. So what's in this food? Well, you could read the labels, but most of us don't do that. Probably a lot of us who are listening to this do, but the mass majority of people probably aren't reading the labels as much as we hope they are. So the good news is computer programmers are creating algorithms and already have. They can tell you what's in your food without having to read the labels. There's several companies out there, and I list some of them here, that are working on you being able to enter in exactly what you're eating throughout the day, so a food diary, and it can actually come up with healthy alternatives that are similar to those foods that you like to consume. So, like the ice cream versus frozen yogurt example, at least you're getting some, probiotics out of that. There are also companies that are working on, as far as I know, there are no actual prototypes out there, but I'm sure somebody has something. You can just take a picture of your meal and it will give you the results on your phone that says, this is how many calories you're taking in, or give you, a monthly summary or whatever. I have no idea how this is going to work unless there's some sort of sending it off to a person who's going to look at it. I'm not optimistic about this technology, but if it works, that's going to be really cool. So stay tuned.
Wow.
I don't know that, can they tell how much butter Kentucky Fried Chicken has injected into the meat products?
All that stuff is published. That's all.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, that's how a lot of these food diaries work. You can say, I went to KFC and I had the 3-piece meal with this and this on the side and a big Coke.
And it plunks it out.
And it'll record all that, and the end of the day, or maybe the next day it says, hey, instead of KFC, maybe you try a salad.
Wow, that is awesome.
So I wanted to get into some applications. I am kind of moving a little bit fast, but I don't want to go over time. So applications, now I set this up as applications for computers, so websites and other applications you might think of as like Microsoft Word, that sort of thing, and for mobile devices, which you think more of as apps. But really they're just applications that run on mobile devices. One that I thought was a really good one was the CDC website. So we'll go into websites first, and I'm going to show you that. They do target the general population, more so than providers, and they're giving weight assessment, preventing weight gain, losing weight, healthy living, and physical activity. That's what they're promoting. So here's the website. And in your slide set that's available on our website are all these links and the references, so you don't need to write these down. So one thing I wanted to show you on here was, assess your weight. It has a BMI calculator, and that I have up over here for children and teens. And I should say that this is not for infants 2 years old and younger. This is just for older children, 2 through 18. So you can see how simple this is. And anybody can come here and enter this information and get their BMI. So that's something either a provider could use or a family could use.
Kevin, does this do BMI and BMI percentile, or do you know?
It does say BMI percentile.
Oh, you're right.
Percentile.
Thank you.
Yeah, there we go.
Calculator.
Okay, because as you know, that in kids, the BMI percentile is much more informative than the BMI, so thank you.
And it provides BMI and the corresponding BMI
Okay.
for age percentile.
Thank you.
Age 2 through 19. And and here's the link for the adult BMI calculator as well. Okay. So, and there's a ton of other references and information on the CDC website as well, on this healthy weight section of the CDC website. So if you have some time, take a look over there. Good educational tool. All right, so back to the slides here. So here's a screenshot of the percentile calculator, the BMI calculator I was just showing you. Another one that we reference quite a bit here at Envision is choosemyplate.gov. This website's actually excellent. I will tell you there's a corresponding app that is not so excellent, but it's based on a really good idea, so we're hoping that they populate their database. And we'll get into that in a little bit. What's great about this is it's very simple guideline for how much food you should be eating, so portioning and food groups. Gives you information, tips for physical activity as well as food intake. And there's what's called a super tracker. And we'll jump back over here on Choose My Plate. Let's see, the super tracker is right here. It's basically a way to track everything you're doing that's related to being overweight. So you can look up nutrition information, track the foods you're eating, as well as the activities you're participating in. You can add goals, and you can print out reports to see how you're doing in relation to your goals. You create your own profile over here, and it's great for the general public, for kids and adults alike. Although I would probably target this more towards the older kids and the adults. So moving on from Choose My Plate, we talk about that quite a bit here at COMM-TC and at PNT Clinic. I wanted to mention also this USDA website, which what I really liked about it was this interactive playground for kids. So it has a lot of the same things that we're talking about with the Choose My Plate and the CDC website. In fact, they all reference each other, which is great. Why reinvent the wheel? So you can check your health risks, all this stuff right here, test your knowledge. The interactive playground is what I wanted to show you. Right down here, along with all this other fun stuff, my very own pizza. I thought this was really cool for, say, ages 5 or 6 through 10 or so. My son is going to love this. He's 8. And so my very own pizza. You can learn about the history of pizza, learn about nutrition, or what I like to do, and I've done this like 3 times now, is make my very own pizza. Of course, virtually speaking. So put in your name, and I'm a 2nd grader. So you're learning a lot from a 2nd grader right now. So let's get started. Wash your hands for 20 seconds, so that's always nice to throw that in there. And so it's all interactive. So it pops this up, tells you what to do. What do you want for your bread? Well, you might want a taco shell or a tortilla, a pita. So you can click on this guy here, or you can click on, the radio buttons. And it gives you a little bit of trivia. Shows you where to go. So we're going in the cupboard. Say, I want barbecue sauce on my pizza because my wife hates it. This is my pizza, so I'm going to have that.
Kind of a sophisticated 8-year-old.
I think so.
Or
He loves this
conniving.
kind of stuff. Choose your cheese, whatever you like. Vegetables. We'll just throw something on there. Spinach is always awesome. I never put fruit on my pizza,
Yeah,
but
no.
hey, why not? Let's throw some raisins on there.
You.
Yeah.
Could we have some pineapple too?
You know what? No. Too late. Sorry, Dr. Dan.
Tofu.
Let's see, and then additions. And I love black olives, so I'm going to pretend those are black olives and put them on there. And to the oven it goes. It flies around like it's a UFO, except it is identified as a pizza. And there it is. And you can name your pizza. And that's my creative name.
And how many calories?
And then it shows you how to make it. That's a good question. I think you'd have to go into the nutrition part of it.
Okay.
I don't believe it gives you the calories. That would be a good suggestion to send these guys.
And Dan,
Calories.
did you know that with this contraption, you don't need to knead the dough?
There is no need. Indeed. All right. The one other app, website application that I wanted to mention that I thought would be really good for even the younger kids too is Sullesville, a healthy neighborhood. And here's a screenshot of it. It's from nourishinteractive.com. And once again, we'll jump over here so you can see a bigger version of it. And just tons of stuff you can do on this website. Learn about what they do on a farm, where does your food come from. You can shop around in a virtual grocery store, learn some word games, and learn about, there's a Solus playground, so encourages physical activity. Really good for, again, the elementary school age kids. So that is all of the apps that I wanted to mention for this desktop computers. They'd work pretty well on tablet as well if you had internet access, or laptops, of course. But moving on to the mobile apps, there are, I can't tell you how many BMI calculators have been created. They're a bit problematic. So the best ones that we've found that Kirsten Bennett, our pediatric nutrition specialist here, uses PD Quick Calc, and she likes it quite a bit. Again, this is only for ages 2 and up. So I looked, I could not find a good one for infants as far as mobile apps go. So you can see it's based on the CDC charts, and it actually will it will plot it on the CDC chart for you after you enter in a few pieces of information and give you the percentile. So that's the one that I'd say we as an entity would probably recommend that one over these guys here, with possibly the exception of ideal weight there at the bottom, because I know that it's for Android devices and the others are really created for iDevices, so iPhones, iPads. So there's just a few more. And like I said, there's an app called MyPlate. What I couldn't figure out is, was this created by choosemyplate.gov or was this by somebody else? The problem is the database isn't very robust, so you can't really look up a whole lot of fruit or vegetables or meats to see what's in them and how many servings you should have, that sort of thing. That's what it's designed to do, but it doesn't have the database to power it yet. And hopefully in the next year it will, but there are a lot of other apps that you might choose over this one. And some of those are right here. Some more nutrition and meal planning apps. Meal Maker, the Food Planner. We're starting to get into some that are more powerful now that you can add your own recipes. They have their own canned recipes. You can pull them in from websites, group them into menus, and then print, in quotation marks, a shopping list. And in other words, it'll show it on the screen. You take your phone or your iPad to the store and go shopping. There are apps like Healthy Out that have nutrition for restaurants. They're a little bit too specific right now, so if you live in San Francisco, you can use this one. But if you don't, it probably isn't going to do you a lot of good, unless you're at a national chain that they also have in San Francisco. The Cut It Out diet app is an interesting one because it helps you track your decision-making process. So you put in your food diary what you actually consumed, but you also watch what you decide not to eat. So if you see a donut over there that someone brought in to share, and you say, I'm not going to have that today, you enter that in too. And so it does some simple calculations and tells you, hey, you avoided this much or this many empty calories today. And another food and exercise diary combination with a calorie counter is MyNet Diary, and it's specifically for iPad, but it's free. Most of these apps, by the way, are either free, but most of them cost a few bucks. I did want to get into some of the physical activity mobile apps. The Nike FuelBand I'm going to go over in a minute, but there's another app called Moves that's for the iPhone, and the idea is you don't have to have an extra device that Bluetooths or Wi-Fi's into your phone. You just carry your phone around all the time. You have it in your pocket or your case, but you never leave it on your desk. It's tracking all of your movement, not just exercise. So, if you're trying to do things with your lifestyle, like parking farther away from your office or the store, so you're walking a little bit more each day, it'll track that sort of thing. So those are pretty cool because they have motion detectors in the iPhones. I'm not sure. I didn't find anything for the Android for that, and I don't know if the Androids are made that way.
I think there are some.
Are there? Okay, I didn't see any.
I think it costs money, or there's I know you can get a heart rate monitor app for your Android, and so that will track your heart rate, which should change if you're parking farther away, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm not sure about all the other things.
Gotcha, and that's one of the other things that these devices are starting to do is track more than just your movement or just your location on the planet, like with the GPS or like a pedometer. It's tracking blood pressure, it's tracking how much you're sweating, it's tracking your sleep. They're doing a lot more now. So of course there's a bunch of apps out there that combine all these things together, so not just a food diary, not just a nutrition information app, and not just an exercise diary, but general healthy living. So Tweak a Week is one of those. They give you little tips every day, small lifestyle changes to healthier living. It's not bad. People seem to like it. It gets pretty good reviews. There's one that's coming up in a minute that I kind of like a little better myself. But another one is Withing's Health Companion. You'll hear that name again here soon. It includes blood pressure and sleep monitoring.
What's up, dude? Checking the garbage. Oh.
And I did want to remind you, if you need to mute, it is *#. Thanks.
Yep. Somebody was collecting the garbage. Could you please mute your phone?
She's not so good.
So this is the one I wanted to mention, the LiveWell. I found this about a month and a half ago, kind of been playing around with it a little bit on the phone. It's from Intermountain Healthcare. It has this 8 healthy habits, which they align fairly well with what we recommend here at Envision. Always eat breakfast, eat more fruits and vegetables, limit sweetened drinks. I know we say no sweetened drinks, limit screen time, etc. You can see them there. It's also food diary. You can set goals. This is actually designed specifically for teenagers, And it has a robust website associated with it too that's listed here. It's a really good resource for teachers and for teenagers, and parents, of course, too. So you can work with the kids if they're willing with this app. And, let's see. The AMA also has one called Weight What Matters, which is hard to say, but play on words, I suppose. And you work with your physician with losing weight and tracking your goals and your progress.
And that's for kids?
That is for kids and for working with the physician.
Okay.
Yeah. It uploads to a website your information, and the idea is your physician would have access to it as well as you would, and you would meet and talk about your goals and how well you're doing. It's a very, very new thing. I imagine that's going to get much more robust as we enter into affordable care.
Yeah.
And just to mention, we're basically out of time here, but Apps for Healthy Kids, challenge.gov. This was in 2010, kind of part of Michelle Obama's push over the first term there. There's a competition that gave money to software developers to create innovative, fun, and engaging tools and games to make more nutritious food choices and be more physically active. Some of these that I've been talking to you about came from that list. It's a pretty interesting campaign. If you're interested, go to appsforhealthykids.com and read up about it. You can see the winners and all the participants, everyone who came up with ideas. A lot of interesting stuff going on in the developing world, the software developing world, excuse me. A few devices to take note of. Up is probably the one that does the most stuff. It was originally designed to be a sleeping, for people with sleep apnea, for sleeping issues. So it tracks your heart rate, your sweat, your everything. It's not a sleep study device by any means. I mean, it's not going to track your brain waves, but it does quite a bit, and it does more than that now. They now have it tracking your eating, sleeping, and activity patterns. You do have to enter in your own meals, of course. It doesn't, it's not a human. So you wear this around your wrist, and it uploads to a mobile app, and then you track everything, and it gives you some feedback through nudges. Maybe you've been sitting for 2 hours and says, hey, it's time to get up and go walk around. Similar to that is the Nike FuelBand, probably one that's gotten the most press. It's one of the older ones. And it's really just worth mentioning. They're amazingly designed for athletes to track their goals and their progress. It certainly could be used by just about anybody. They're about $120, whereas the Up device, which does quite a bit more, is about $200. And this one, I just wanted to mention, Aspire Assist, which is just something kind of novel that I had never heard of before. So providers may have heard of this or be interested in this. You actually have a valve surgically implanted into your stomach. And after you eat, I believe it's 20 minutes after you eat, I forgot to write that down, but you actually drain up to 1/3 of your meal out, so you don't digest that third of your meal. So not the most pleasant thought.
Yeah, no.
But it is hopefully after lunch for you. I had to mention that because it's just one of those things I've never heard of. One more device to mention is called FullScale. This is that Withings company they have their own just standalone app for food diary and activity tracking, that sort of thing. But this will actually, it's a scale that connects through Wi-Fi through your iPhone, and actually any mobile device. There are Android apps as well. It measures your body fat and body mass index, so you can tell if maybe you're gaining weight because you're doing some weightlifting, but maybe you're actually losing fat. So it's not just your weight, which is not the most reliable way to know if you're healthy or not. And like I said, it's sent wirelessly to your mobile device. And there are desktop computer apps as well for them. You don't even have to have an iPhone or Android. And a few other devices, and then I'll conclude and turn it over. The Xbox Kinect, I think, in my opinion, is the coolest one of the three big, the Wii, the PlayStation Move, the Xbox Kinect. You don't need a device at all. You just stand up there, you wave your hand. It's also voice activated, and we're lucky enough to have one at my house. And my son plays this Padawan Jedi game, and you're just standing there pretending to fight things off with a lightsaber, and he goes nuts. It is so much fun to watch, and he's up playing, and he would do it for hours. And instead of sitting there on the computer playing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, he's up jumping around and pretending to fight off these bad guys. So, and there's a bunch of those games out now. The Wii also is enabled. I think the newest Wii will have this sort of technology, but the old ones you had to hold the wand in your hand. So a lot of TVs were broken. A lot of little sisters were hit with these things. You go to YouTube and it'll take you 5 seconds to find a video of somebody destroying one of their TVs with one of these wands because they didn't wrap it around their wrist. Same thing with the PlayStation Move. The old one I know required a wand, and I think they're probably moving on to more the Xbox Kinect style. Of course, we've had pedometers forever that track your movement, and they've gotten much, much nicer in the last 10 years, I think. And then smartwatches. Right now, smartwatches, the idea with these is they really go to... they're really marketed towards people who are training, marathon runners, that sort of thing, and they're pretty pricey still. So it's probably not time to run out and get one yet, unless you're into early adoption. But I imagine these are going to get much, much more powerful, and that's the word on the tech street. So watch for those coming up, pun intended. There's my references. And this would be a good time if anybody's hasn't said that they're here and would like to get credit for being here. Make sure that you say your name at this point, and also take any questions you might have.
E.J. Charles in Zuni, New Mexico.
Thank you.
Hi, CJ.
Caroline for Espanola Schools in New Mexico.
Mavis Williams, Eastern New Mexico University in Roswell.
Erica Smith, registered dietitian, Hopi Healthcare Center.
Diana Thompson, Cark Inc.
Janae Avila, Molina Healthcare.
Valerie Bradley, health assistant with Zuni Public Schools. Belinda Waller, Cark Inc.
Cassandra Vanderpool, Cooperative Extension Service.
Welcome back, Cassandra.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone, and thank you, Kevin. That was really very informative, and I hope there are a lot of questions. I'm going to just start with a comment that probably about 4 years ago, we were having a discussion about technology and kids and obesity, and we were all pretty much the we is evil. And then we looked at a couple of studies that actually found that kids who interacted with the Wii and played on the Wii sports sort of things actually lost weight compared to those who just played on video devices. So So we've changed our mantra about that, and I think the point is that technology is here to stay, and we need to take advantage of it with our kids and use it for their benefit as well as for their pleasure. And the Xbox Kinect is pretty way cool. I play that with my kids, and we have an agreement, you can play 30 minutes on the Kinect and 30 minutes on whatever devastating game you want to play. And it works out really well. So, and some of these other applications that Kevin has pointed out, I think could be really fun for families to use, and for kids to use to actually try to do better and be healthier. So does anyone have any questions or comments?
Could I ask Kev a question?
Sure.
This is Kirsten from UNM Pediatric Nephrology, I'm a dietitian. I just wondered, I recently read an article about, I want to say it was the Institute of Medicine was like discouraging doctors from that kind of text communication, whatever, with their patients. Did you come across anything like that?
Discouraging it for reasons for PHI or?
I don't know. I didn't read into the whole thing, and I was wondering what it was, because in the dialysis world, there's tons of apps we're starting to create just as a big group where we do reminders for taking your binders, taking your this, like on Facebook, for example, they're developing one. And I just didn't know if you came across anything like that.
Not really. I mean, there's resistance to using it, I think, by some physicians, but as long as you're not talking about, PHI or anything HIPAA related, I don't think you have any issues. And even reminders, for appointments can be done over text. I mean, you just have to follow the same rules as you would leaving a message for someone on an answering machine. You don't leave a specific name, or you say, hey, you need to call me back, and then you give them the reminder directly. Of course, there's an issue with teens and having the phones, and maybe their parents are monitoring those phones, and to some extent they really should be. So, I mean, there's an issue of confidentiality there, perhaps.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's something we need to think about. We need to educate ourselves on a little bit, and make sure that the physician and the in this case teenager are talking about that. So they don't start sending them texts about something that they don't want their parents to know about.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
But I didn't really run into anything specific about that. I'm really just kind of conjecture here.
Okay. Yeah, this is Kathleen. I'm sure there's pushback, but you know what? It's the reality, and we have to move in that direction, and we have to do it in a way that's safe, but effective for patients and families. And so it'll be interesting to see how it evolves.
Yeah, I agree.
And of course, you
Right,
want to
you.
take into account if a kid doesn't have unlimited texting or something like that, then you need to talk about
Right.
that.
That's true. Yeah.
Who else do you have in the room there with you?
Oh, so Jen Jackson's one of the dietetic interns. Hello. Actually, she's graduating next week.
Yeah.
So
Yay.
that's exciting.
Congratulations.
And then Diana Gonzalez Pacheco is a bionutritionist research dietitian with UNM.
Hello.
Hi there. Welcome.
Great.
Thank you.
Other questions from the outside audience?
Oh, I have a question. How I can utilize this for Native Americans?
Referring to maybe the language barrier?
Language, and because I know not a lot of the children I know out here at Hopi would have that type of technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and having limited access or no
Limited
internet
access, and this. So service out here is pretty bad if they wanted to download some of the apps and.
Right. So through the school system, you can access it that way. I think most schools have internet capability. It's not necessarily great at some places, but you can print out materials. We still have the paper and pen format that we can use. So I think the materials are printable. Obviously, you can't do it on demand or live, but that's an option.
So yes, on some of the websites that we talked about in the beginning of the presentation, you could print that sort of thing out.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, Kathleen. Yeah.
And then I don't know if you guys have summer programs at community centers, but again, going to a place where there is a broadband and internet access would be valuable to these kids, but it's actually probably better if they don't have it, because then they can just chase a ball around.
That's true. That's true. Thank you.
That's a great question, though. And while we think we are all completely connected in the World Wide Web, it's really not true, especially in places like Hopi, northern New Mexico, etc., where you can't get access. But if the kids have satellite dishes, there are lots of interactive exercise things that you can do, from a satellite dish program, Zumba, hip hop, anything else. And so if that's their thing, then get them engaged that way.
Okay.
Also, there's the National Diabetes Education Program. Through IHS, and they have a lot of materials that are more native specific.
That's true, and so that you can easily download some of that information. And there are a lot of the children's books that are very native specific, and I can get you information on some of those as well. I'll send that out by email.
Right, and there's the new Move It, and there's a native specific program for the Move It program that Michelle Obama started, and I think you can find that in the IHS website or the diabetes education program. One of those websites should give you some information.
Thank you. And we will try to send out all of that to all of you, and so that you can look into it. And then please give us comments on your successes with it. I think what we're going to do now is move on to Dr. David Selvich and his presentation on pertussis in New Mexico. And this comes at an opportune time because there has been an increase in pertussis occurring around the country, but also in New Mexico. And so I'm going to let you take it over, David, at this point.
Great, thanks. Can everybody hear me? Am I coming through?
Yes.
Yes, you are.
Okay, wanted to double check. First off, I'm not a doctor, but thank you for making me one honorarily.
But do you play one on TV?
Pardon me?
Do you play one on TV?
I wish.
Yeah, me too.
No, I'm a physician assistant by training and an epidemiologist. I work in the New Mexico Department of Health, and I'm in the Infectious Disease Epidemiology Bureau here. Oops, wrong slide. Oh, there we go. Okay, can everybody see the slides?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. So I'm going to talk to you about pertussis in New Mexico, and I'm going to go pretty quickly so we have a little bit of time for questions. Today we'll just do a brief overview of pertussis, look at what's been happening in New Mexico and nationally, talk to you a little bit about some of the hypotheses around the reemergence of this disease, review select myths among providers in New Mexico, and these are things that we have come across on a frequent basis amongst providers in the state who are seeing patients with pertussis or suspect pertussis, and then talk about some immunization recommendations, particularly some very new recommendations. So Bordetella pertussis is a bacterial infection. It's only found in humans. It's highly contagious. It's suggested that in some studies that 90% of susceptible household contacts will acquire the disease if somebody's infected in the household. The highest morbidity and mortality is among infants, and I'll just stress this, that really when we're talking about pertussis control measures, we're really talking about protecting infants in our communities. Infants suffer a disproportionate morbidity and mortality from this disease. It's estimated worldwide on any given year there's 30 to 50 million cases and more than 300,000 deaths per year attributed to pertussis. And despite very high vaccine coverage rates, even amongst school-age children who are fully vaccinated, it's poorly controlled, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So just a brief slide about the pathogenesis of pertussis, and really the take-home message is that pertussis is a toxin-mediated disease. So it's not a parenchymal disease. It's not a bacteria that gets into the tissues like a strep pneumo, but instead what happens is this bacteria sits on the epithelium of these respiratory cells, and it attacks, well, it doesn't really attack, but it produces toxins that paralyze the cilia in the respiratory tract that normally keep mucus and things moving. And as a result, you get not only this phenomenon where all this stuff backs up, but there are other toxins that it produces that inhibit the recruitment of neutrophils. And so it acts in a multitude of ways, but the main take-home is that it's a toxin-mediated disease, and the main toxin, bad actor, being pertussis toxin, that causes the paralysis of the cilia, the hair-like cells, that normally keep things moving in the respiratory tract. This is just an electron micrograph. It's a pretty picture. I like it. And you can see the cilia, which are these hair-like projections. And then if you can see this, well, you'll see that there are some round spherical bacteria that are kind of a darker orange that are sitting on the surface of the cilia. Those are the pertussis, and they produce the toxin and cause the paralysis of the cilia. So just a brief slide on the classic clinical presentation of pertussis, and I want to emphasize classic because pertussis can actually present with a full spectrum of symptoms, from classic, which appears more severe and gives you some of the characteristic signs and symptoms, to really just having prolonged cough and nothing else, particularly in adults. So if you see people like that, you need to be thinking pertussis. But classically, incubation period ranges from 4 to 21 days, and it goes through 3 stages. The first stage of the disease is called the catarrhal stage, which really refers to mucus producing, and usually lasts 1 to 2 weeks, but can be up to 3. And you have a mild upper respiratory infection that's really difficult to distinguish from any other upper respiratory infection, that's characterized with coryza, little or no fever, and a non-productive cough. Infants can have apnea and respiratory distress, and that may be how they present. And this is the most infectious period. The next stage is the paroxysmal stage, and what happens during this stage is people will classically develop a paroxysmal cough. A paroxysmal cough is characterized by spasms of coughing that make it very difficult for people to catch their breath between coughs. This can last anywhere from 1 to 6 weeks, and increased frequency is the first 1 to 2 weeks, and then the same for 2 to 3 weeks with gradual decrease. People will frequently, if they have the paroxysmal cough, which is characteristic of the disease, also present with a whoop. You see this particularly in children, and post-tussive vomiting, where they vomit immediately after a coughing fit. Cyanosis is something that you frequently will again see in infants. They may not present with paroxysmal cough. They may have a mild cough, but will have cyanotic episodes because they're unable to catch their breath. And then classically what you'll see in the convalescent stage, which is when the cough becomes less persistent, is just a gradual decrease in the frequency of cough, but it can go on for quite some time. So why are we all concerned about pertussis? Well, again, we're seeing a tremendous increase in disease, but we're really worried about our infants and children, but really the infants are the ones who bear the brunt of this disease and are much more likely to suffer complications, be hospitalized, or die. This slide it just shows pertussis incidence nationally going back to the 1920s. And as you can see, incidence was very, very high into the 20s, 30s, 40s. And you also see this kind of spiky pattern. There is a natural history of the disease where we tend to see these outbreaks every 3 to 5 years. It was in the 1940s that the DTP, which is the whole cell vaccine that covers diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis, was introduced. And we saw a dramatic decline in incidence of disease until about the mid to late 1980s when we began to see a gradual increase. What was happening is the DTP vaccine was becoming unacceptable to parents because there were increased side effects associated with it. And so we got real smart and we developed the DTAP vaccine. DTAP is an acellular form of the pertussis vaccine that's combined with diphtheria and tetanus toxoids. And it really just targets, well, it depends on which manufacturer, but up to 5 different antigens in that vaccine that produce immunogenicity in the human host, as opposed to the DTP vaccine, which literally had hundreds of different antigens. Well, they selected out 5 that were thought to be particularly important and included them in the acellular vaccine. Unfortunately, what we've seen since then is a dramatic increase, and you can see in the inset in the upper right-hand part of this slide, what we've seen over the last 12, 15 years is this dramatic increase in pertussis nationwide. This slide shows the United States by state and gives you 2012 provisional incidence by state. And as you can see, New Mexico ranks amongst states with the highest incidence rate nationally. The little blue stars, I just want to point out, are states that are participating in a CDC-sponsored program called Enhanced Pertussis Surveillance. That's the project that pays for my position here in New Mexico. And what this project is attempting to do is collect a lot of additional information on every confirmed and probable case that comes through. We're also attempting to try to get pertussis isolates, which has become much, much more difficult since the advent of PCR technology, which is a preliminary chain reaction technology for testing, which doesn't require actually growing the organism. So since that's become kind of the default method for diagnosis, culture's really gone by the wayside. Well, we're trying to reinvigorate that in New Mexico so we can actually get the organism, grow the organism, and do the molecular biology on it to figure out what's happening with the organism that may be contributing to the increase in incidence nationally. This slide just shows just pertussis cases. These are just case counts going back to 1992 to 2012. And as you can see, there was kind of a gradual increase up until 2011, and then things have just gone nuts. And as of yesterday, I checked. I think we've now finalized our data for 2012. I hope we have. We have had some late cases reported, but we had 898 cases for 2012, compared to 2011 when we had 276, which we thought was a banner year. And so far this year, we're on pace to set see the same numbers as we did last year in 2013. Mm-hmm. This slide shows age-specific pertussis rates by age group and time period. So the 3 time periods we're looking at here, the blue bar or grayish blue bar is 2006 and 2008 cases combined. The green bar is 2009, 2011, and the red bar is 2012. And as you can see through all of those periods, for all of those different categories, infants less than 6 months of age always have much higher age-specific rates than the rest of the population, but it was just extraordinary in 2012 amongst this age group. And the other thing that's interesting to note, and I'll show you this, it's better in the next slide, is that we've seen a tremendous increase in the rates amongst school-age children. So these bars, the green and the red bar, represent 5 to 9-year-olds and 10 to 19-year-olds. So these are, by and large, fully immunized populations in our state. And what we've seen is just this dramatic increase in rates amongst school-age children. So why is all of this? What are the theories that explain what's going on, this reemergence of pertussis? first theory, which is supported by some very good data, is that there's waning vaccine-induced immunity that's associated with the acellular vaccine that was introduced in the 1990s, and is also part of our new vaccine, relatively new, which is the Tdap vaccine, the booster vaccine we give to adolescents and adults. What the studies have shown, and these are based primarily on the epidemic that was declared in California in 2010, is that after a child has gotten the 5th dose of vaccine, assuming they're on schedule, the protection is excellent for the first year or two, but it wanes pretty dramatically and quickly after that. So by the time a child is 5 years out from that 5th dose of vaccine in that primary schedule, about 70% or less of kids are still fully protected. The other thing that's contributing to what we're seeing, as I alluded to before, are improved diagnostics. We don't have to depend on culture anymore to diagnose this disease, since we now have PCR technology. And so what that means is that we don't have to grow the organism. Growing this organism is difficult. It's a very fastidious organism. And it's thought that, in fact, the sensitivity of culture probably is around 30%, maybe a little higher, depending on if you get a good specimen and it's handled appropriately, whereas the sensitivity of PCR is 90 to 95%. And so we have improved diagnostics, and we think we're identifying more cases. We've increased awareness in New Mexico and nationally because of what's been happening, so there's always somewhat of an artifact associated with just getting awareness out to folks. Decreased vaccination coverage, and I hesitate to really say that this maybe is what's causing what we're seeing, but we are seeing increased vaccine exemption rates around the country and in New Mexico, and these tend to be pockets within communities, people who tend to have certain ideas around vaccination and tend to cluster together, but we have seen increased vaccination exemption rates in New Mexico and other parts of the country. Are most of the cases vaccine exemptors? By all means, no, but they do seem to play a role in outbreaks when we identify them. The vaccines, unfortunately, as I've alluded to, are not as effective as we'd like because we are seeing this trend of waning vaccine immunity. And the other thing that's relatively new that some folks may have read about or seen in New England Journal of Medicine is that we are now starting to see some changes in the organism itself in the United States, where one of the antigens that is in the acellular vaccine currently that targets a part of the gene in this organism, that this specific section of the gene in some samples that have been tested is no longer being expressed. So what we're seeing is some adaptation and change in the organism that may also be contributing to the increase in incidence. So I want to just end with some information that may have some clinical relevance for folks. And this relates to pertussis myths. And these are things that have come up over and over the last year and a half. And so we have put out some education to providers and the public. So the first myth is that children who are fully vaccinated can't get pertussis. And we hear this from parents, and we've heard this from providers. And we just want to let you know, and as we have, that almost 50% of pertussis cases in New Mexico in 2012 were fully vaccinated children. So just because a child shows up with all 5 vaccines, by the time they're entering first grade, doesn't mean that they can't get pertussis. And certainly what we've seen is that as children start to approach 5th and 6th grade, there tends to be an increase in incidence. Another myth is that most young infants appearing well during office visits can be safely monitored as outpatients. And when I say infants appearing well, these are infants that are coming in whose parents are concerned that they may have pertussis because at home they've observed them having a coughing fit and starting to turn blue. And in fact, infants intermittently during an infection with pertussis may look fine. So it's really important, particularly if they're very young infants, that we monitor them very closely. And in fact, American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that all young infants, in other words, less than or equal to 3 months of age, with possible pertussis should be admitted to the hospital to be observed. So I think it's the take-home message here is to really listen to parents. And if they're telling you that they're seeing this, we recommend you take it seriously if you're a provider. Let's see. What happened here? Now my slides are not advancing. Seem to be frozen.
Myth. Slides will advance with the push of the button.
Oh, there we go. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, next myth. Patients diagnosed with pertussis can leave the home after starting an appropriate antibiotic or within 24 hours. I've heard that one a lot. Parents saying, oh, well, the doctor or PA or nurse practitioner told me that I only had to be on the antibiotics for 24 hours. Then I could go back to school or I could go back to my normal activities, back to the soccer team. Actually, patients with pertussis must remain isolated at home for the first 5 days of an appropriate antibiotic in order to no longer be infectious. And, you know, that's partly a fact, or partly a reality of the fact that this is a toxin-mediated disease. It's actually much more difficult for the antibiotic to get to the bacteria. And so there are good studies that have been done that show that you really need to be on the antibiotics for this period of time before you return to normal activity to no longer be infectious to other folks. Another myth, patients treated with an appropriate antibiotic for pertussis who continue to cough after treatment should get a second course of antibiotic. And we see this a lot where people are getting multiple courses of antibiotic. It's the bacterial toxins that cause the damage to the airway. And even after somebody's been appropriately treated, those folks may continue to cough for weeks as a result of the toxin and the damage that's occurred to the airway. So there's really no indication for antibiotics for pertussis. Now, if something else comes up, that's another story. But one course. Another myth, cough medicines can help to control the pertussis cough. It's just a waste of money, actually. A pertussis cough can last for months, and cough medicines have not been shown to improve the cough associated with pertussis. My patient has received a tetanus diphtheria booster recently, so I can't administer the Tdap. There is no minimum interval between receiving a tetanus booster and getting a Tdap vaccine. Again, Tdap, as opposed to DTaP, Tdap is the vaccine that's the booster for adolescents and adults. And most adults in the United States have not yet had a Tdap, even though it's recommended that everybody get one. So just keep that in mind. And again, there's no minimum interval between the TD vaccine and getting a Tdap. So last slide, just to go over the vaccine schedule, and I'm not going to go through this line by line. I think most people are probably pretty familiar with it. But the couple of things I wanted to really point out. Number one, all adults at this point who haven't had a Tdap should have one. All healthcare personnel should get a Tdap if they haven't had one. And the recent big change, the recent recommendation is that all pregnant women should receive a Tdap booster with each pregnancy. Not just once, which was the recommendation that came out in 2011, but as of February 2013, CDC published this recommendation, which is that all women who are pregnant should receive a Tdap booster with each pregnancy, and ideally between 27 and 36 weeks of gestation, so that they can pass the maternal antibodies on to the infant who's too young to be immunized. So that is my presentation. I'm not Joan Baumbach. That's my boss. But I just wanted to thank you very much for this opportunity to present, and I'll answer any questions people might have at this point.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to start out with my two questions and then open it up to everyone else. One is fairly simple, is there a seasonal component or affect?
That's a really interesting question. Yeah, I've looked at that, and looking back at the last 5 years, what we tend to see is an increase in September and October when school goes back into session, and then it drops off, and then we see another little spike sometime in the spring, February and March. However, pertussis occurs year-round.
Okay.
So though we do see these waves epidemiologically that are reflected in this increase when school goes back into session after summer, and then again in the early spring. If you're seeing somebody with a prolonged cough illness, you need to be thinking pertussis, regardless of the time of year.
Thank you. My second question has to do with the waning effects of the immunization and the fact that there are people not getting immunized. So is the not getting immunized contributing to more kids who have been immunized getting infections due to the waning effect of the immunity?
Yeah, that's a
make
very
sense?
good question. I mean, if you think about it, you know, you even after you've had natural infection, immunity wanes with this disease. After you've been fully immunized, immunity wanes. And so that's why CDC now recommends that everybody, regardless of their age, once they're an adult, they get this Tdap booster. And unfortunately, the latest estimates are that probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 to 15% of adults nationally have actually had the Tdap. So there's a huge reservoir of susceptibles out there amongst adults, and we are seeing more adult cases. Adults, unfortunately, may not present with a paroxysmal cough. They may not present with post-tussive vomiting or a whoop. So these are the things that you know, kind of classically and typically tip providers off that they're dealing with pertussis. But in one study that was done, they found that over a third of people presenting to family practice clinic in this study who had a prolonged cough, when I say prolonged, I mean 2 weeks or more, who were adults, actually had pertussis. Adults are also less likely to seek care and kind of just, you know, muddle through. And unfortunately what that means is that they, as you've alluded to, they're much more likely then to pass their infection on to anybody else who has waning immunity, and particularly infants. So there's this other notion that people may have heard about, which is cocooning. This idea of cocooning, which is a term that CDC came up with, which is to protect everybody around an infant by making certain that everyone in that cocoon, in other words, everyone who's going to be around that infant, has had their Tdap shot and is up to date, with the hope that by making certain that everyone's vaccinated, there can be a shield of immunity around the infant, and it'll be less likely for the infant to become infected. So it's very important that we try to pass on this message that everybody who needs a Tdap should get one. And then again, the big change, and I'll just reiterate it, that all pregnant women at each pregnancy should receive a Tdap. And again, ideally at 27 to 36 weeks if it can be coordinated.
Thank you. Other questions from participants in the audience?
Yes,
I have a question. Oh.
Your Vesta Hospital, and I actually have two questions to ask. One is, when the patient has already received a course of antibiotics, does it do any good to test?
That's a good question. It kind of depends on where they are in the course of their illness. Generally speaking, once somebody has completed the antibiotic, you know, we don't recommend testing. But we have found, not because, you know, we've recommended it, but were situations where people have taken an antibiotic and then for one reason or other they get tested. We have ended up getting positive results back. But generally speaking, no, we don't recommend that. Just because at that point, even with PCR, the bacterial load starts to wane be reduced pretty quickly. And then the other thing to keep in mind is that, generally speaking, the natural history of the disease is that once somebody's had a paroxysmal cough for 3 weeks, they're generally no longer considered infectious, as long as they're over 1 year of age. Infants are a little different story. But if you have a patient who's a year or older, if they're no longer or if they've been coughing for 3 weeks or more, they're no longer considered infectious. However, even in that situation, as I mentioned before, we've had people who were tested up to 4 or 5 weeks out and have tested positive. So in terms of the individual patient, it may not really matter at that point. For public health purposes, it can sometimes inform our investigations and decisions. But generally speaking, yeah, we would say not to test after somebody's completed their antibiotic, but that person should still be reported to us. And then to keep in mind that after they've been coughing for 3 weeks, they're no longer considered infectious. So the yield in testing will go down.
Okay, you just made the comment to still report them to you. So if you have a patient that has had the cough for 3 weeks that they did an antibiotic before they thought about pertussis, so they don't test. Do those need to be reported?
They do, because they may meet the clinical case definition for our purposes as being what's called a probable case. So in other words, we define for public health and surveillance purposes people as cases if they meet a clinical case definition, even if they've not been tested. So for instance, if somebody's had a cough for 2 weeks or longer and they have one or more of those other pertussis-defining symptoms, so if they've been coughing for 2 weeks or more and have a paroxysmal cough or a whoop or post-tussive vomiting, they don't need all three, just one, then we call them a probable case in the absence of some other more compelling diagnosis. That also helps us in defining cases that are epidemiologically linked to other laboratory-confirmed cases. So, yes, we would still like to hear about them, and we will follow up.
Okay. My other question that I had, prior to this, we received a set of slides for your presentation, but the myths are different than the slide set that we received. Are we going to be able to get an updated set?
Sure, yeah, and I apologize about that. There was some confusion about who was going to present today, whether it was going to be Joan Baumbach or myself, and I think she took my slides and altered them a little bit, so I apologize about that.
Okay, thank you.
Shame on her. We will get the updated ones and then distribute them.
I have a question.
Yes.
I was wondering, can you speak to the risk of seizures in vaccine? I know that the insert in the vaccine says that if there's infantile spasms or ongoing neurological problems, that children shouldn't get the vaccine. But how real is that risk? Is it sort of leftover from the old vaccine, or is that?
Yeah, it is. The risk associated with the acellular vaccine is extremely low and remote.
Okay, so if a child has...
I can't unfortunately give you... I can look it up and I can get back to you if you want, but I can't give you a percentage, but it's very, very low.
Okay.
So I have a question. If someone who's currently an adult did have a clinically diagnosed, or not, well, if they had a reaction to the DPT, then are you saying that the new adult booster is going to be safer, and that person who previously had been told not to have another one could possibly have the new one?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, I would suggest they consult with their doctor about that. I don't, every case is different, but the acellular vaccine, as I said, really it just has 5 antigenic components, and the reactogenicity rate with the BTAP and the Tdap is very, very low.
Okay.
I'm a school nurse in northern New Mexico, and we have not a whole lot of students that are exempt, but we do have some, and it seems to be on the rise. How do you feel about maybe tackling that, and if that contributes to the increase in outbreaks?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. We did a study in 2010, and what we looked at, and again, I want to just reiterate that we have had vaccine exemptors who have been reported as cases, but by no means does it represent a majority of cases. It's a minority. However, we did this study in 2010, and what we looked at were the pertussis clusters. So we took pertussis cases going back 5 years, and we geocoded them on a map. And then we also then took vaccine exemptors and geocoded them. And what we found is that there is an association. So, and this is not novel. This has been done by other researchers and epidemiologists. But what we found in New Mexico is that if you live in an area, in a census tract, that has a high number of vaccine exemptors, you're much more likely to be part of a pertussis cluster. So there does seem to be this, this correlation between vaccine exemption, being in an area where there's a higher percentage of vaccine exemptors, and then also being part of a pertussis outbreak, or living in an area where there is a pertussis outbreak. And in fact, the odds ratio is 15, which means that you're about 15 times more likely to be part of a pertussis cluster or live in an area where a pertussis cluster was identified if you were also living in an area where there was vaccine exemption. The same thing's been shown with other, with measles in other studies. So, it's very, very interesting. And as a result, the Department of Health has been working to try to better monitor vaccine exemption in schools, and also we're trying to institute some policies that that really reflect what's in the law. I think what had happened for a while is we'd gotten pretty laissez-faire, if you will, about allowing people to get a vaccine exemption, even if they didn't have a religious belief that precluded that from getting vaccine, which is what the law really says. The law in New Mexico says that you have to be part of a religious group or have a religious belief that that precludes vaccination, but that it was really not being applied in that manner. And we've gotten a lot of flack and a lot of pushback as a result of that, but we really feel that it's something that's important to try to reduce vaccine exemptions in our state. I will also state, though, however, I should have mentioned this, that you can be a vaccine exemptor for medical reasons. That's also part of the law.
Well, I have a question. Since I work in outpatient clinic, I'm just wondering, I'm constantly, going to be around these kids, and we're always talking about, getting vaccines to protect the patients we see. So as a healthcare worker that's always around sick and also healthy children, how often do I have to get a booster shot?
Very good question. And right now, CDC only recommends that adults, not non-pregnant adults, just have evidence of having had Tdap one time. Now, I suspect that recommendation will change in the future. Perhaps what will happen, just as we're now recommended to receive a TD booster every 10 years, I think what that will probably happen, though I don't have a crystal ball, is that will become a Tdap every 10 years, or perhaps even every 5 years. I don't know. An ACIP is looking at the data. ACIP is the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, for those of you who don't know. And they get together and really set policy around immunization schedules for infants, or children and adults. The current recommendation, however, is just that everyone have a Tdap once. Anybody who hasn't had one, again, except for pregnant women, who should have one at each pregnancy.
I was curious because when you said 50% of the kids that get it are already vaccinated, and we're exposed more than the general population, I think, to the sick kids. I didn't know if we should be doing it more often, but thanks for answering.
Yeah, sure. Not yet, but stay tuned. I imagine that recommendation will change.
Okay.
The moral is just don't get pregnant.
I'm working on that. I do pretty good at that.
Yeah. I'm not getting pregnant?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Inappropriate comment by Kathleen.
Yes.
I think we have time for one more question, if there are any more.
Well, thank you so much for your time and attention, and please feel free to call us if you have any questions. If you have a suspect case or confirmed case that you want to report, don't hesitate. The reporting number 24 hours a day is 827-0006. Again, that's 827-0006. There's an epidemiologist on call 24 hours a day, evenings, weekends, and holidays. So give us a call.
That's great. Thank you so much for that update. Our next session will be in 2 weeks on the 17th, and that will be a review by me about what's going to happen during summertime and childhood obesity.
Oh, great. That was a great presentation last year, Dr. Collar.
We have to do it every year because it turns out there is summer break every year. I will be doing it on the road in Minnesota, and Kevin and I are figuring out the logistics of that.
You betcha.
You betcha. Yeah, don't you know it? So, in the meantime, if you have got questions, comments, cases, please feel free to present them formally, informally. Remember, if you have a Molina patient, you will get reimbursed. And there is a billing code for that as long as you are a nurse, dietitian, or a physician presenting a Molina patient. So otherwise, have a great week. Happy Cinco de Mayo.